Hello there, everyone, and welcome to GamePoints episode 359. Your weekly little get-together, we talk about recent gaming news. As always, your host, Steve Brandon. Tonight, we have to talk about whether or not the Xbox Showcase actually delivered what it was promised, whether or not it was better than the PlayStation Showcase, and also Diablo 4. We have an update to that story last week about how apparently sold very big numbers. Well, we actually have some raw data to work with. All that and more in just a moment. But first, I want everyone here to know this is an audience interactive podcast. So if you're watching here live at Twitch TV/GamePoints every Tuesday at 8 p.m. or later at any myriad video hosting platforms, be they YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, etc., feel free to join the conversation with any questions, comments, concerns you might have down below. Just try to keep them germane to the topics on hand. All right, Watermelon, good to have you, and everyone else lurking, always appreciate it. Let's go ahead and go into the first story that I want to get into. This here is a press release from Activision Blizzard itself, so keep in mind it is coming from the mouth directly of the corporation itself, so it is going to be spun in such a way to be 100% positive all the time. But I have no doubt in believing that they're not true either. From the press release, Diablo 4 earns more than $666 million in sales in the first 5 days, setting a new Blizzard record. Now, this is an update to a story we did last week about how apparently Diablo 4 is the fastest selling Blizzard game of all time. Well, it also seems to be the biggest selling one, too. Figure as much, they would go hand in hand. Moving on to the actual press release itself here. Blizzard Entertainment's fastest selling game of all time blazed past $666 million in sales. By the way, cute number to put in your press release given the nature of the game. In less than a week since its June 6 launch, also a 6/6 day, exceeding the worldwide box office of all horror films released in 2023 combined. That might not be as impressive as it sounds, considering the game is, what, 70 to 80 bucks these days, 100 if you get the collector's edition. Plus, we don't know if they're counting microtransactions or anything like that in this number. They very well could be, but I'm not positive. Furthermore, how many horror movies have actually come out this year? Still, it's a cute bit of advertising and marketing to throw in your press release to kind of keep things going. If Diablo 4 were a movie, it would have had the biggest launch of 2023. That's more impressive. They also gave some numbers to go along with it as well. Some like funny little facts and figures here. I love shit like this. It's one of those things I like to look at, and it kind of just puts things to perspective. Since launch in its first week, 276 billion monsters have been killed. We've had just over 300 million player deaths with the get good in parentheses there. I assure you someone somewhere is bitching about the get good mentality in there because, well, they just need to get good. 276 million hours played since early access. That's more than 30,000 years, which is impressive. That is a number that your advertisers are going to be more interested in. That your stockholders are going to be far more interested in, is the fact that almost 300 million hours have been played. That's impressive. The Butcher himself counts for 5.8 million of those deaths, and they are currently #1 on Twitch from the early access period of June 1st till June 9th, which is about 5 days ago or so here. Awesome. I love little facts and figures like that. Diablo 4 is clearly a big hit. I don't think anyone saw that going to be otherwise. It seems to be on track to surpass Diablo 3's 30 million copies sold, I believe. I would say it's probably even going to dwarf that. Now, we mentioned some numbers up here earlier. I'm going to scroll to the very bottom because they were asterisked, so we can take a look at them here. First one they want to clarify is that our lawyers told us that the fastest selling is based on both units and dollars sold through on all platforms for the first 5 days after launch, essentially through June 10th. Sales figures based on reporting received from digital partners, retailers, Blizzard internal reports, and estimates. And how they got those numbers with the Entertainment Weekly comes from Mojo, Box Office Mojo, rather. Thank you for adding those caveats in there, because there were some questions on whether or not there's always questions like, do you mean sell-through or shipped? There are ways that a company can manipulate language to lie to you while simultaneously telling the truth. The way I like to phrase it is factual but not honest. And it seems like they're being upfront in some things on here. And the fact that they're giving raw numbers means that they're impressed with it. Because remember one of the maxims of the show. If a company hates how well something did, they won't talk about it ever. They won't give you raw numbers. But if they love it, they will shout to the moon to exact dollar amounts how much it made. So, if you ever see a company being cagey about how many units something sold, if they say things like it met expectations, it means they're kind of pissed off about it. But if you see a company doing this where they're like $666 million, fastest selling game of all time, etc., that means they're kind of over moon behind it. Take a look at chat here. Joe, hold on. So, sorry. Weird. That's something weird to go on my end. Here we go. Let's take a look at chat here. You do find it funny that we all forgot we were angry at Blizzard. Yeah. Hey, boycotts are what they are. Now, I fully admit, too, I went into Diablo 4 openly saying, hey, take a look and see. I even tried the beta before I said this is going to be something I want to get, because I know from past experience that Blizzard games have fucked us before. I'm not even talking about the myriad of Activision Blizzard issues going on right now. Yes, I know that there is the Call of Duty operator skin controversy with Tim the Tapman and the other gentleman who had their skins removed. I know that there's the myriad of sexual harassment claims going on in Activision Blizzard. I know there's even the Microsoft Activision merger that's happening, or may not be happening, considering that this week the FTC decided to slap an injunction on it, or is trying to slap an injunction on it. We'll see how all that shakes out. But all those controversies aside, let's just focus in on the Blizzard and the gaming aspect of it rather than all the secondary stuff. Games have been fucked at launch. A lot. And Blizzard specifically has a lot to make up for with Diablo 3's disastrous opening few weeks, where you were getting, what was like Rule 19 or Error 19 or whatever it was, and no one can log in, and they had their real world money auction house, and it was just a nightmare of unforced errors. However, Diablo 4 seems to be relatively stable. I haven't had any major issues with it myself, and that seems to be the norm. There were some authentication issues on console. I hear you guys out there, but for the most part, this seems to be a very stable and well-received launch. And when it comes to something that has massive server overload like Diablo 4, like any big live service game, and Diablo is a live service game now, there's no way around it. They even have a battle pass, for God's sake. It's almost expected that it's going to be janky and buggy as hell at launch. But for the most part, this has been relatively stable. Now, it's a sad state of affairs that we have to look at a company and say that the bare minimum of expectation, a game that runs fine, is something that should be deserving of praise. But the reality of the situation is we live in a world of ship it now, patch it later, where a whole host of problems are creeping up all over the place in every game. And it's not just from Activision Blizzard. From EA, from Bethesda, from Sony. The only one that seems to skirt past it these days is Nintendo, but Nintendo's always marched to the beat of their own drum, so it's really even hard to include them in any discussion about this stuff. And yes, chat, we all expected it to be comically buggy. This seems to be working just fine. And I think that is going a long way with its sales. Diablo is always a huge franchise. Controversies aside, people were going to buy this up in droves to begin with. It's just refreshing to see it being not only well received, but functioning. Which kind of, like I said, is a sad state of affairs for us to be in the year of our Lord 2023. That we have to praise a game for fucking working at launch. Now, that's not to say that they won't disappoint us some way later down the line. There is going to be a seasonal pass structure with this. If I were to liken it to anything, I would say Destiny is probably going to be the closest thing to liken it to, where you have quarterly season passes and then a big expansion once a year or so. We discussed last week that they have wrapped up their first expansion already. They're already working on their second one. I expect one of those about a year or so, for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, as long as they can stretch it out before we get Diablo 5. In fact, my gut tells me they're going to try to turn Diablo into Destiny or World of Warcraft, which is just the same game you keep coming back on for the next decade or so. That really does seem to be the feeling that I get with how they're going with it. And from what I have played so far, kind of fine with that. I know that Paragon levels are kind of artificially capped as well. I don't believe they were in Diablo 3, but they are in Diablo 4, which, of course, leads to room of them bumping that cap up another 100, 200, 300 every time. They're like, okay, we need an extra challenge. I get the feeling that is why they capped it, so they can introduce new level caps later on for whatever the current season they have going on is. Something to keep in mind if you're looking for the long game here. But congrats to Activision Blizzard. You seem to have a hit, and to everyone who worked on the game. I am so happy that you guys did the seemingly impossible in the past half decade, and that is launch a game relatively glitch and controversy free. Hats off to you, Activision Blizzard. While we're on the topic of Activision, we did mention Microsoft briefly because of that merger going through, which brings us to our next topic here. I want to talk about whether or not the Xbox Bethesda Game Showcase actually delivered or not. This is not a comprehensive breakdown of everything that was shown. The conference itself was about 2 hours or so. You can go take a look at that if you want to. What I want to focus on specifically is, did this meet the promise of expectations, especially when compared to Sony's, in my opinion, lackluster showcase? And in my opinion, this actually did bring the thunder a little bit. It wasn't the massive fan servicey shit we used to get from E3 of old, when we would have like the Final Fantasy remake followed by Shenmue 3 followed by The Last Guardian, all announced back to back to back. Those days are long gone. We're not going to get anything like that. But as far as the modern showcase, direct, live feed, whatever you want to call it, I felt like this was a pretty good one. And it hopefully, at least for me, which means it did its job, alleviated my fears of what was coming from Microsoft. Now, up front right now, I don't own an Xbox. Between the two consoles, I'm a Sony guy. So before I get screams of fanboyism, let me just go ahead and put that out there right now. I don't own an Xbox. I have no intention of buying an Xbox. My console base is Switch and PlayStation. I'm a PC gamer, however, primarily. So fuck off, y'all console plebes. But it has been an interesting generation where for the longest time, we still don't really have anything coming up. I know PlayStation released Horizon and God of War, but we really still don't know what they have coming next. They did a couple of quick CGI trailers of Concord and Fair Games, or whatever the hell that Ubisoft meets Payday shooter is coming out. And they showed us a little bit of a Marathon as well. But for the most part, none of that's coming out really this year. And neither is what we're going to see here at the XCOM Bethesda Showcase, beyond Starfield, which we'll get to that in a second. 2024 is 2023 rather, is shaping up to be a surprisingly good year for games. But not for Xbox, because the only thing they seem to have coming out is Starfield. But that could be enough to catch people's eyes. Let's take a look here. Chat says Clockwork Revolution, I think it's called, the game from NXL. That does look amazing. Bethesda keeps psyoping me into playing Fallout 76. I think I'm over with and done with that. I don't think I'll ever go back to that. Let's see. Xbox has a cool thing where I can just buy Xbox games on PC, so I tend to care more about their stuff. Yeah. They're really pushing Game Pass. One thing that was obvious with this game showcase is that they are really, really pushing Game Pass, including with Starfield, which will be day one, quote unquote, on Game Pass. And the reason why I put that in quotes is because they're doing that early access thing where if you spend extra money, you get to play it 5 days in advance, which to me means the real release date for Starfield isn't the 6th, it's the 1st of September. So if you have that Xbox Game Pass, you can wait 5 days, or you can get hit by the FOMO and pay the extra money for it. And that is deliberate, by the way, to separate you from your money. So keep an eye out for things like that, where it could be out for an early access if you pay a little bit of extra money. And people will do it, by the way. I'm not necessarily going to get into the big third-party stuff on here. There are a couple of first-party games we haven't heard from for a while, and I'm kind of glad to see them. I'm going to say up front, we are missing a lot of things still. Still no Perfect Dark. Still no Indiana Jones. No word on any of them. So I'm very, very curious where those games might be, because it has been years since we've heard from them. However, another game that's been years we've heard anything from is Fable. Glad to see this coming back up. Still no gameplay, still no date, but the trailer itself was humorous. It lets us know that they're still thinking about it. However, with how they were teasing it, I at least expected some kind of release year and maybe a little bit of gameplay. Everything I saw looked like a CGI trailer, albeit a very well crafted and something that captures the spirit of Fable trailer. But no game, no hype. At least that's something I'm trying to live by more these days, because I have been burned far too many times. That said, could be some potential there. I'm looking forward to it. They also showed a bit of Star Wars Outlaws. This is Massive Entertainment's seemingly open-world Star Wars game, which almost feels like the successor to the long-canceled Star Wars 1313 that was being developed. The reason why I'm super excited for this one is because, one, they actually showed some gameplay of it. Two, it's set in the appropriate time period for Star Wars, which is going to be between Empire and Jedi. Everything outside of that original trilogy, I don't fucking care. Besides the Old Republic, but that seems to be an entire another mess going on right now, so don't worry about that. What really excited me about this Star Wars trailer, though, is what was not shown. There was not a lightsaber. No one using the Force. And I believe, I'll have to take a deeper dive into the trailer, I don't think they even mentioned a single planet that was ever mentioned in any other bit of Star Wars canon. And the reason why I love that stuff is because Star Wars as a franchise has always been a mile wide, but like an inch deep. It's such this vast galaxy, but it only is surface level. They never go outside like the same 10 fucking planets. And it's always about a Jedi. And there's always fucking Darth Vader jacking things up. There are certain things that are always in a Star Wars game in a universe that is filled with trillions of people that are more than just Force users. I'm super hyped that we're actually getting a trailer that seems to be leaning more into the underworld criminal element, which was always hinted at and has been in multiple games as well. Remember Empire at War, they had Tiber Zahn, for example, as one of the 3 factions that you can play. Dark Forces was mainly a smuggler. He didn't even get powers until they decided he needed to be a Jedi all of a sudden. The underworld side of Star Wars is a massively underexplored aspect of that lore, and I'm really glad that they seem to be getting more into it. Take a look back at chat here real quick. Watermelon says, everything is CGI trailer until I see a user interface. Even then, I have seen games that have actively faked a user interface, by the way, so watch out for that. Rocco Gaming V says, maybe they are running out of ideas. Wouldn't it be hilarious if they added cone heads to the franchise? I mean, you can kind of say the Twi'leks are a little bit cone-headed shaped, maybe, with their... I don't know. But yeah, Star Wars does kind of feel like it's running out of ideas, which is why Outlaws was so refreshing to see. And I trust Massive. I think Massive Entertainment's done some good. These guys are mainly behind the Division these days, but I'll always remember them as doing the excellent World in Conflict. One thing, by the way, that logo for Star Wars Outlaws with the slowly flickering in neon lights, that's garbage. I know you're not going to change it, but I think that looks like ass, and I wish it was something else. They started a little bit of Avowed. This is Obsidian's new upcoming RPG based in the Pillars of Eternity universe, which it could be cool. I like Pillars of Eternity. It has a newer art style, it seems, compared to the last time we saw it. It seems to be a little bit more... I don't 100% mean this when I say it, but it looks a little bit more Fortnite-y. I think you'll understand what I mean when you see it. And they've openly said this is going to be more like Outer Worlds than Earth Skulls as far as scope goes. So just keep your expectations in check on that. And then, of course, the big one, Starfield. Starfield has a hype level that has not been seen since Cyberpunk, and some can say has even exceeded what Cyberpunk had before going into it as far as like pure uncut hype. People are unleashing the fucking Kraken on this game when it comes to how much they're swearing allegiance to already, and we still really haven't seen all that much of it until recently. Starfield had massive, massive expectations going into the show about what was going to be shown, and I think they hit them. At least that seems to be what the general consensus is. No one seems to be disappointed about what was shown off by it. Now, I tried to take a far more measured approach, especially when it comes to Bethesda games. As we all know, they are typically loaded with jank. Oh, and by the way, they did come out and say it is going to be locked at 30 frames a second. They did that after they did all their big announcements in a little tiny press briefing or interview somewhere. They went 30 frames per second and then kind of went off. Keep that in mind. I know that is a deal breaker for some of you out there, not for myself, but if you get it on PC, modders will fix that eventually. Excuse me. I think that Starfield has the potential of being great. Excellent. It has the unfortunate timing of launching in the year that Tears of the Kingdom came out of, because that game is going to just win all the awards regardless if it deserves them or not. I do not think it does, but that is an entirely different conversation to be had. The fact that it is just a Zelda game alone means it is going to suck out on anything else relating coming out this year, even if those games are potentially better. But we are talking about a game that's not even out yet. I do not want to sing this game's praises for something that I have not played. I am going into it with a very optimistic but skeptical eye. You know what I'm trying to say. Eye on this. I feel like Microsoft and Bethesda both are aware that this game can be nothing less than excellent. The reputation of that entire studio is kind of riding on it. And I think that is one of the reasons why they delayed it. Not because they couldn't ship it out already, but because of polish. And they've even said as much in recent interviews that this is going to be the most polished Bethesda GameWorks game ever. And I hope it's true. We'll absolutely see. Take a look at chat here again. Let's say chat saying, gamers, can we talk about how Starfield is literally No Man's Sky when referring to the procedural generation? I will admit, I'm going to mute myself for 2 seconds. I will admit that is worrying, because when I was hearing some of the stuff about Starfield's quest systems, I keep hearing the Radiant quests from Elder Scrolls, which were little more than randomly generated numbers matching randomly generated items. Go find 15 candlesticks, go kill 10 rats, etc. Those were boring as hell. Outdoor Medic, good to have you, by the way, as always. What this feels like is them kind of combined. What Starfield feels like it's going to be is, they say it's hundreds of worlds. I get a distinct feeling 95% of those worlds are going to be nothing but barren resource hubs. Land on this planet, get a couple of minerals, bounce off. And then your 5% of the worlds will contain your story and your side quests, etc. And what I think these worlds are going to be the worlds where you touch down, there are 5 or 6 locations that will always be fixed and half-crafted, and then they just fill in the rest with the occasional biome of that planet. So a lot of it is going to be procedurally generated, but I think the main story and side quest plots are going to be roughly similar to each other. Outdoor Medic, thank you very much for the subscription, by the way. I do appreciate that. After the Starfield Direct, I am more hopeful for the game than I was going into it. I am a little bit less cynical about it. But it does look like a Bethesda game, for all the good and bad that implies. So, that aside, did the Xbox Bethesda Game Showcase deliver? I think so. I absolutely think so. Xbox owners have been in a desert for years now, it feels like. And they needed a win. And this feels like it gave them a win. I think it blows the Sony showcase out of the water. I think that was a lukewarm reception at best, and I think even Sony was caught off guard by that, considering you had people saying total gaming mindshare when hyping it up, and people just kind of went, eh. That said, a lot of their shit doesn't come out until 2024. Microsoft has one real big thing to rely on, and that is Starfield. That's all their chips are on that one. So it behooves them to make sure that is a banger. And that is a mere 3 months away. So we'll see if it actually delivers that project or not. No problem. You have a good one. Thank you for dropping by. I'll see you back again next time there, Outdoor Medic. Moving on to our next topic here. While we're still talking about Xbox Game Studios and why some of this shit might be taking so long to come out. This next article here is from Video Game Chronicle. The link to this and all of our stories will be posted in the description down below if you want to go read for yourself, and I do recommend you do so. From Video Game Chronicle, Xbox Game Studios chief says people need to realize games now take 4 to 6 years to make. This kind of touches on a few things. We've been talking about how game budgets and staffs are just getting comically bloated. The cost of everything is going up significantly, and they're just becoming unwieldy. And I do think that you have a lot of studios who keep chasing graphical fidelity at the cost of gameplay. And that's the issue, I think. I think that is why these are taking 4 to 6 years. Not so much that they're making a better game as much as they're just making a better looking game. And I think it's unsustainable myself. But that's an entirely different conversation. Let's go to hear from this article. In an interview with Axios, I don't like to link to Axios, by the way. Not that I have anything against Axios, but I hate their formatting. They just do a bunch of quick bullet points on their article, and it's like, okay, I go to read to get a more in-depth feeling on it. That's a personal reason, but that's why. If you're wondering, I'm not using Axios, using Video Game Chronicle instead. That's why. Back to the article. In an interview with Axios, Xbox Game Studio chief Matt Booty said the following. I think that the industry and the fans are a little behind the curve on a sort of reset to understand that games aren't 2 or 3 years anymore. Specifically, they're referring to high-end, big-budget games, which Booty add now they're 4, 5, and 6 years. Booty's comment... where were we? Here we go. Booty's comments are in the light of criticism faced by Xbox for the slow cadence of major releases that have blighted the platform in recent years. While Sunday's Xbox Game Showcase looks to correct some of the course somewhat, some still pointing out that a few titles shown, such as Playground's reboot to Fable, still remain undated despite being announced several years ago. The reboot of Perfect Dark, Obsidian's Outer Worlds 2, and the Machine Games' Indiana Jones were also missing in action from the conference, and based on Booty's comments, you still might not see them for some time yet. By the way, Elder Scrolls 6 was announced a couple years ago. That's probably not even going to see the light of day until 2028 at the earliest. So just keep this shit in mind. They're getting a little absurd of how quick they're announcing games. What they should be doing, in my opinion, work on the game for 2 or 3 years, and then when it's like a year away from launch, and then say, hey, this is coming. I think that's what needs to start happening a little bit. It's not necessarily on the consumer to go, oh, well, what do you mean shit's coming out 3 or 4 years? It's like, motherfucker, you trained them to expect new games every year. You did this to yourself. You can't be like snooty at the consumer for thinking that we're going to get games every year when you yourself set that expectations. You need to take a look in the mirror a little bit there, Matt Booty. Anyways, moving on. There are higher expectations, Booty told Axios. The level of fidelity that we're able to deliver just goes up. And that's what I'm talking about. You're focused on chasing the graphical fidelity of the game as opposed to actually making a good game. You know who doesn't chase graphical fidelity? Nintendo. To a degree, Fortnite. Apex Legends. League of Legends. Massively popular games that aren't the best looking that's out there. But people love to play them. Why? Because they're good. Yes, I know. I don't like most of those games myself, but they're good games. They're well received. And that is an issue. That is a huge issue. But he also told the press this week that he believes Xbox already turned the corner when it comes to regularly delivering first-party titles. But when we get into 2024, it really kicks into gear, he added. Yeah, 2024 seems like it's going to be a huge year for Xbox for certain. And considering that we really don't know what's coming from Sony in 2024 beyond a couple of grumblings here and there, they're probably right. Let's take a look at chat here. Take all the time you want to make a game as long as you are not comically abusing your workers. No. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't mean that you should be taking people and working them 100-hour weeks for a year straight, like BioWare was doing there for a bit. No. But crunch is an undeniable reality in almost every industry because, you know what? At the end of the day, when you start reaching deadlines, you got to get shit out the door. Furthermore, leaving unlimited leeway to actually produce something, that's also unsustainable. There needs to be a balance between, okay, we need to actually put our nose to the grindstone and work for a couple of weeks and put in a couple of long weekends. There has to be a balance between doing that and going, well, I guess for the next 52 weeks, I'm working 100-hour weeks, which is fucked. There is this notion that any crunch at all is unacceptable. That's just not true in any business, anywhere, period, end of story. Not just in gaming, but anywhere. There is going to be some degree of crunch. That is just to be expected. There are meetings and timetables to be hit. There's product that needs to be shipped. There are quarterly results that have to get hit. Those are the realities of business. What is not acceptable is making your staff work, like I said, an entire year where they get absolutely no weekends. There has to be some kind of middle ground here. So I don't necessarily take the all crunch is bad stance. But a lot of it can be whittled down for damn sure. Also, it's that scope thing. Games are just too big. When you have to have thousands of people working on them, for example, Assassin's Creed. I always like to use this one as the go-to. Assassin's Creed map is ludicrously chock full of pointless shit that most people aren't going to go digging across. You could easily remove half of those markers on there, reduce that workload by who knows how much, and make a just as competently playing game. Scale needs to be taken a very close look at. Let's take a look here. Rocco Gaming V says, because they won't finish a title. They push out half-baked games to meet quotas. We can't really say it takes 4 to 6 years to make. They need to understand that we're not born yesterday, and we know generations change every 4 to 6 years. You can start a game dev PlayStation 4 era and expect to release a game on PS5, and now your title looks dated with that you have to work on more updated graphics. There's a couple things about that. I think that the console generations are going to increase in time. The last generation was, I want to say, 8 years before we had the PlayStation 5 come out, in a time when it was normally about 5 years per generation. I think you're going to see more half-step consoles, like the PlayStation Pro, for example, between the big generations. Furthermore, you're right in that it takes time to actually develop this shit, because you start making it in PlayStation 4, and then the PlayStation 5 comes out, and it's like, well, fuck, this is now handicapping our software to PlayStation 4, but we had crossover to PlayStation 5, but it doesn't look as good because it's the catered lowest common denominator, etc. This is a rant I've gone on before. But yeah, I 100%. It is the graphics are the main element in game development, because they keep trying to push things to look better they keep pushing things to look better rather than things to be better. I also think this is one of the reasons why every single game company out there, unless you're some small indie studio or something like that, is fully embracing AI. I keep telling people AI is not going to go away. And everyone who's saying we need to boycott AI or we're not going to talk about it on the forums, you sound just like the record labels did in the 90s with Napster. Love it or hate it, it is here. It is not going away. Especially when game budgets get extremely bloated and take 4 to 6 years, if they can just take an AI script editor and go, okay, write all my NPC language for me, and then you just have someone copy edit it real quick, make sure it makes sense. And it could save a couple weeks, a couple months here and there, reducing that 4 to 6 years to 3 to 5. It's here. It's going to get better and better and better. Embrace it. Yeah, you don't need to embrace it. But you need to learn to deal with it, because it ain't going away. Because of shit like this. You will stop Skynet. Good luck. You already working for Skynet, son. I got 3 more stories here that I want to get through. First of up here, we have this open letter by Embracer Group. Now, Embracer had a bit of a uh-oh recently, where their company dropped 40% in stock share value after they came out and said that a $2 billion partnership with an unknown entity fell through. Now, you don't suddenly lose 40% of your stock and not undergo massive revisions. And, well, this is what their response is going to be. This is an open letter by CEO Lars Wingfors, I believe is his name, Wingfor. I'm not going to read over every bit of this. I'm going to give you kind of the Cliff's Notes of it, but you can read it down in the description below if you want. CEO Lars Wingford released a report in an open letter where Embracer is going to, quote, turn into a leaner, stronger, and more focused, self-sufficient company. In layman's terms, that means cancellations and job cuts. First up, let's go and expected job cuts here. In the letter itself, it says the following. Embracer currently engages close to 17,000 people And while that number will be lower by the end of the year, it's too early to give an exact forecast on this. By the way, expect these layoffs to come in multiple waves, because also back to the statement. Throughout each phase, and wherever possible, we will work to ensure the affected team members receive information first. Where we can, we will try to provide opportunities for our colleagues to transition onto other projects, and while it's important to note we were moving roles in some companies, we will continue to hire in others. Throughout each phase. To me, that screams layers of layoffs. A studio shut down here, a canceled game here, merging of studios here and there. Embracer needs to cut a lot of fact. And the fact that they're not telling us numbers, remember what I said at the beginning of the show. If a company thinks it's good news, they'll sing the numbers to high heaven. If they think it's bad, they ain't going to say shit about it. Be concerned if you're working at Embracer. By the way, layoffs are not the only thing that's going to be happening. Expect many canceled projects because the statement says the following here as well. Actions will include, but not be limited to, closing or divestments of some studios and the termination or pausing of some ongoing game development projects. It'll also include the decreased spending on non-development costs such as overhead and other operating expenses. That is shutting down studios and moving them out of office. By the way, that's one very easy way to do that. We will reduce third-party publishing and put greater focus on internal IP and increase external funding of large budget games. They're going to stop buying shit. That's what you can interpret that into. That's how I interpret that anyways. The potential impact from the programming future game release. I'm sorry, let me start over. The potential impact from the program of future game releases will almost be entirely around unannounced projects. All announced significant releases will still be released as planned. Remember how they released that little video that said they had 65 games in active development? Yeah, just slash that number by half instantly. If they have announced it, it's probably going to come out. If it's something they were working on or related to any one of the numerous properties they gobbled up, I think like Soul Reaver, for example, or the Legacy of Kain series they own now, don't expect anything from it anytime soon. In fact, expect them to probably sell some of that shit off. Not looking good for Embracer. They expanded too quick, too big, too fast, and they are now imploding on themselves. We're about to who would have thought that a company that decided to take the THQ name for the longest time would be having some issues, but here we are. Let's see. Rocco Gaming says that sounds like the Saudis at work shot in the dark. Though very possible. It could have been the Saudi Public Investment Fund, whatever that thing is called. It could have been them dealing with it. I don't think it was them trying to buy Ubisoft or anything like that. But yeah, it could have been. My gut tells me either aligning with the Saudis or some kind of deal with Tencent. If I had to venture a guess as to what that $2 billion deal was. Yes, I agree. They got indigestion. They swallowed up way too much, way too fast, and they're like, okay, well, we're gonna make things out of everything on it. And now games take 5 years to crank out, and they're like, shit. We have all these costs and no incoming revenue. We're fucked. We have 2 more stories. First up here, this one's kind of interesting from Games Radar Plus. Legend of Zelda movie may be in the works of Super Mario Bros. Movie production. For those of you who don't know, that Mario movie has done gangbusters, so it makes sense that Nintendo might be finally over their shyness when it comes to releasing a movie. To the article itself. After the Super Mario Bros. Movie became the biggest video game movie of all time, it looks like Nintendo and Universal Studios are collaborating on a new adaptation. The Legend of Zelda franchise is reportedly getting the big screen treatment next. Journalist Steven Snyder reported the following on the Hot Mic podcast, rather. I can read. I'm told that Universal is in fact closing a big deal with Nintendo Corporation for The Legend of Zelda. Zelda is looking to be the next big Illumination Nintendo franchise, which we're all sort of expecting. I'm told that's happening. It makes sense for Nintendo and Universal to pursue a continuing partnership. The Super Mario Bros. Movie grossed $1.3 billion worldwide, making it the highest grossing movie of 2023 so far, and also the movie that had the highest opening weekend at the box office for any animated movie. Of course they are. Nintendo has, they do love money. All things we were saying about them earlier, they are still a corporation and they love them some money. There's no way they're not going to. There are probably already plans on doing a Super Mario Bros. Movie 2 as well as a Legend of Zelda game and movie. So if you like Nintendo franchises, you're going to be eating good here soon. Mario movie being the highest video game movie of all time, not like that's a high mark to hit. Take a look at the Warcraft. Take a look at global sales for Warcraft. That is actually a surprisingly high movie to hit. Plus, when you talk about animated features, Frozen 2. I mean, it is big. Mario movie is doing very, very well. We're going to end this show with one bit of sad news. Not necessarily a major game, but I find the story behind this interesting. Friday the 13th, the game is finally coming to an end, it seems, as they lose their license. Friday the 13th, the game will no longer be available to purchase digitally and physically after December 31st, 2023. Publisher Gun Media Friday the 13th license will expire on that same day. The game will be playable until at least December 31st, 2024. So no one's going to be able to buy this game by the end of this year, and it's up in the air whether or not you're going to even be able to play it after 2024 into 2025. Now, the reason why I bring this up, and you can see they're discounting it for super, super cheap and everything like that if you want to get to it. The reason why I bring this up is because Friday the 13th is in this weird legal battle where the rights are being fought over between two separate entities. The person who wrote the screenplay to the very first movie, and then the producers who also claim they own rights to it. The game itself was made and being developed before these legal battles happened. So Gun Media was just like, great, we can keep releasing new content for it and all that good stuff. And then the lawsuit started firing off. And Gun Media wisely went, hey, until we know what happens with this, we're just not going to make any more shit for it because we can't afford to be spending our time and resources and paying licensing fees on something that we might not even get a return on if the lawsuit goes against the people we're dealing with. And it did. I'm not going to get to the details of the lawsuit itself because that is a whole nother conversation. But just know that this is a game that is being shut down, not because it is unpopular necessarily, not because Gun Media sucks, but because of legal wrangling between two entities over who owns the Friday the 13th name. It is a fascinating read if you're interested in the myriad peculiarities of copyright law. So I'd recommend, if you're into it, take a look at the story behind this. I'm not going to get to here because it's more of a Hollywood thing than a video gaming thing, but I did want to mention it here at least we cap off this show that Friday the 13th, the game is coming to an end. And that does it. This has been GamePoints episode 359, and thank you all for showing up. I do stream this show, whatever you want to call it, live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time right here at twitch.tv/GamePoints, and you're all more than welcome to join the conversation like so many of you do. If you can't join us live, however, you can watch this show over at myriad of video hosting platforms, YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, etc. There's a Discord you can join. The link is down there somewhere. You can follow myself at CapitalistPig21 on the Twitters, and I do stream live here at twitch.tv/GamePoints throughout the week. Typically strategy games, so lately I've been some Diablo, some System Shock, though I'm starting to get that Hearts of Iron craving again. Bunch of new content just released on Kaiserreich. It's starting to tickle the back of the head there. Thank you all for showing up. This has been GamePoints, and until next week, I'm out of here.